At the height of the Roman Empire, Germanicus Julius Caesar was unanimously regarded as one of the greatest fighters the empire had ever produced. He also had an impressive pedigree. He was the son of Nero Claudius Drusus, who in turn was the son of Livia Drusilla, wife of Emperor Augustus, and the younger brother of eventual Emperor Tiberius. Antonia, the daughter of Mark Antony and Octavia, Emperor Augustus's sister, was Germanicus's mother. The agnomen Germanicus, the name which he was known for, was a hereditary name bestowed upon his father in recognition of his conquests in Germany. Tiberius, Germanicus's paternal uncle, who succeeded Augustus as the Emperor of Rome, a decade later, adopted Germanicus in 4 A.D. It was understood that he would be his uncle's heir when the time came for him to be Emperor of Rome. This was Augustus's wish, as Augustus adopted Tiberius as part of the succession preparations, on the condition that Tiberius adopted Germanicus, thus putting him next in line after Tiberius. Also, that same year, a marriage was arranged between Germanicus and Augustus's granddaughter, Agrippina. Agrippina and their children were always by Germanicus's side when he held subordinate posts on the Danube frontier under Tiberius from 7 to 9 A.D. The troops were immensely impressed by Germanicus's family's novel, although potentially perilous arrangement. Of his 9 children, only 6 of Germanicus's children reached adulthood: Nero Julius Caesar, Drusus Caesar, Gaius Caesar, the future Emperor Caligula, the future Empress Agrippina the Younger, Julia Drusilla, and Julia Livilla. Overall, Germanicus's career appears to be on an upward trajectory. He was elected consul for the first time in 12 A.D., and a year later he was named proconsul of Germania and the whole of Gaul. From there, from 14 to 16 A.D., he commanded 8 legions, nearly 1/3 of the Roman force at the time, in battles against Germanic tribes. In 17 A.D., he came back to Rome to receive a triumph before leaving for Asia Minor. All his children marched in their father's triumphant parade. In 18 A.D., Germanicus was appointed co-consul, making him one of Rome's 2 most influential men, along with the emperor himself. Germanicus remained popular even after he died in 19 A.D. For the Roman people, he was the Roman version of Alexander the Great, who died at the same age. Given Germanicus's accomplishments, it is somewhat unfortunate that Caligula, through his reputation as Rome's mad emperor, eclipsed his father's popularity. Germanicus's 3 daughters were just as scandalous as their brother. But can we blame them? Despite their parental privileges, Germanicus's children grew up in an atmosphere of distrust and terror. Even in Germanicus's lifetime, Emperor Tiberius already saw the family's prominence as a potential danger to his power. Later, Germanicus's wife Agrippina the Elder suspected Tiberius of being involved in her husband's death. The people of Rome did not help matters either. The people who held Germanicus's family in high regard prayed in response to Germanicus's death that the elder Agrippina's children might live to survive their enemies, and referred to her as the only true descendant of Augustus. Years later, Agrippina the Elder and her 2 eldest sons were accused of treason. All 3 died in deplorable circumstances, with Agrippina the Elder herself dying of starvation in exile in 33 A.D., born circa 18 A.D. Julia Livilla was Emperor Caligula's youngest sister. She was born on the Greek island of Lesbos during her parents' tour of the eastern Mediterranean. She was only a little girl when she and her family returned to Rome following Germanicus's tragic death in Antioch in 19 A.D. Livilla and her sisters were raised by her great-grandmother Livia and by her equally impressive paternal grandmother Antonia. Emperor Tiberius likely arranged for all 3 sisters' marriages. Livilla was first betrothed to Publius Quinctilius Varus, the Younger, son of the governor of Germania, who was also Tiberius's friend, Publius Quinctilius Varus with Claudia Pulchra, Augustus's grandniece. However, Quinctilius was accused of treason in 27 A.D., and the marriage did not take place. Livilla would have been about 9 years old at this time, while her fiancé was 23 years old. For Agrippina, Emperor Tiberius had chosen Gnaeus Domitius Ahenobarbus, a man of reputable ancestry. Domitius was a blood relative of the founding Caesars, but Suetonius characterizes him as a wholly despicable character, characterized by violence and dishonesty. Agrippina married him at the age of 13, in the year 28, and gave birth to her only child, the future Emperor Nero, in the year 37. "No decent man can come from me and this woman," Domitius said, Suetonius, The Life of Nero, 6. However, Agrippina's life seems to have taken a favorable turn, as this marriage likely shielded her from the fate of her mother and 2 of her older brothers who were accused of treason and killed 5 years later. In 33 AD, the same year that Tiberius banished Germanicus's widow and her 2 eldest sons, he also arranged for Livilla to marry Marcus Vinicius, at the time only a minor public figure whose family came from a small town near Rome. Nevertheless, as both his father and grandfather had served as consuls, his station in life was not so far below that of the imperial family. At their wedding, Livilla was 15 years old, and Marcus Vinicius was 28 years old. In that same year, Tiberius arranged the marriage of Drusilla with Lucius Cassius Longinus, another one of his friends. When Caligula became emperor in 37 AD, he divorced his sister from her husband and wedded her to his ally, Marcus Aemilius Lepidus. In circa 41 AD, when Lucius Cassius Longinus was serving as proconsul in Asia, Caligula ordered his execution because of an oracle, which Caligula interpreted as indicating that a man named Cassius would assassinate him. Caligula was not completely wrong in this interpretation, as he later would indeed be assassinated by the Praetorian Guards commanded by a soldier by the name of Cassius Chaerea. Many of the tales about Caligula and Drusilla might have come from traditional Roman dining habits. It was traditional in patrician families for the host and hostess of a meal, or the husband and wife in charge of the home, to hold positions of honor during banquets held in their home. While a bachelor was in charge of the household, his sisters regularly cycled the female honor posts. When Caligula was a bachelor, it was customary for Agrippina, Drusilla, and Livilla to alternate sitting in his place of honor. Caligula, on the other hand, violated convention by designating the place of honor completely for Drusilla. It's also likely that the rumors of incest involving Drusilla and Caligula were intended to damage Caligula's leadership after his death. Born 28 years after the death of Caligula, the Roman historian Suetonius is the most popular source of these rumors. He claimed that Caligula lived in habitual incest with all his sisters, Suetonius, The Life of Caligula, 24, and that Caligula and Drusilla were once caught together by their grandmother Antonia. When Caligula became emperor, his first step was to restore and, if possible, elevate his family's reputation even further. He bestowed significant honors to his 3 sisters, as well as notable privileges such as Vestal Virgin rights, which entailed, among others, the freedom of watching public games from the top seats in the stadium. He also included their names in the oath of loyalty to the emperor. The sisters are also prominently depicted on coins struck during Caligula's first year in power. Agrippina represents securitas, the empire's security and strength, while Drusilla and Livilla signify concord and fortune. However, despite appearing to lead an adventurous and luxurious court life, all 3 sisters were completely under their brother's control, and according to Suetonius, Livilla and Agrippina were put to work as prostitutes by her brother. On the other hand, Drusilla was said to be her brother's favorite. She was also alleged to be her brother's lover, even since they were underage. Even as a married woman, Caligula treated Drusilla as his legal wife. Drusilla died in 38 AD at the age of 21. During her illness, Caligula never left her side. After she died, he refused to allow anybody to take her body away. In addition, Suetonius wrote that Caligula made it a capital offense to laugh, bathe, or dine with one's parents, wives, or children. Suetonius, The Life of Caligula, 24. Though only Julius Caesar and Augustus had been deified in the past, Caligula deified Drusilla. He had a temple built for her, complete with priests, and gave her the name Panthea to signify that she possessed the virtues of all deities. He also grieved at her public funeral as if he were a widower. A year later, Caligula's only known daughter was born. He named his daughter Julia Drusilla after her sister. In 39 A.D., Livilla and Agrippina participated in an aborted plot to depose Caligula and replace him with his brother-in-law Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, Drusilla's widower. Marcus Aemilius Lepidus was also rumored to be both sisters' lover. Caligula executed Lepidus and auctioned off his sister's properties. He then commanded Agrippina back to Rome in disgrace with orders to carry Lepidus's ashes in an urn for the entire journey, declaring that his family members should not be awarded any more honors. He then exiled her and Livilla to the Pontian Islands. Nero was taken from his mother as a tiny child and placed in the care of his aunt, Domitia Lepida, as his father. Domitius also died around this time.
After the death of Caligula, Livilla and Agrippina returned from exile on the instructions of the new emperor, their paternal uncle Claudius, younger brother of their father Germanicus. However, Livilla soon fell out of favor with Claudius's wife Valeria Messalina. Messalina would have had clear political motives for exiling Livilla, niece of the current emperor and sister of the previous emperor of Rome, and her supporters. Influenced by his wife, Emperor Claudius charged Livilla with adultery with Seneca the Younger. Livilla was most likely sent to Ventotene in 41 A.D. and also by her uncle's orders was executed soon after by being starved to death. She had no defense, and the allegation of her relationship with Seneca the Younger was never substantiated. It was unclear how her sister Agrippina managed to escape this fate, but when Agrippina became empress, Livilla's ashes were later returned to Rome and interred in the mausoleums of Augustus. On her sippus were the simple words Livilla Germanici, Caesaris filia hic cita est, Livilla, daughter of Germanicus Caesar, lies here.
The longest surviving daughter of Germanicus, outliving even her brother, the emperor, was Agrippina. Agrippina was born in 15 A.D. in a garrison camp on the Rhine's banks. She was only 3 or 4 years old when her father died, and soon began learning the inner workings of the imperial court, from the finest examples in Rome, as she was cared for by the Roman Empire's 3 most powerful women: her mother, her grandmother Antonia, and her great-grandmother, Livia. Upon her return from exile in 41 A.D., with Emperor Tiberius being dead and no longer available to arrange marriages, and the current Emperor Claudius largely leaving her to make her own decisions, Agrippina immediately began looking for a husband. She first pursued Galba, a wealthy man with a promising future. Galba later became emperor. Although Galba was married, Agrippina publicly made attempts toward him, which prompted Galba's mother-in-law to publicly slap her. Undaunted, Agrippina next focused her attention on the literary personality, Gaius Celestius Passianus Crispus, who was also extremely wealthy and politically influential. Like Galba, Passianus was married. However, he was willing to leave his wife for Agrippina. Passianus died not long after their marriage, leaving Agrippina and Nero as his heirs. In 48 A.D., Emperor Claudius's wife, Valeria Messalina, was discovered in a treasonous plot and put to death. Claudius quickly considered remarrying. He focused on several women, Agrippina among them. Agrippina would have been about 33 years old at this time. She was young, beautiful, not married, and her fertility was already proven, as she already had a son. Additionally, because she was Claudius's niece, a marriage with her would retain control of the empire in the Claudian family. Agrippina, never one to overlook an opportunity, profited by a niece's privilege of kissing and caressing Claudius in public to arouse his interests. However, this advantage was also a disadvantage because Roman law and custom deemed such a marriage incestuous. The issue was settled when the Senate passed laws allowing a man to marry his brother's daughter. After marrying her uncle, Agrippina was finally able to maneuver more effectively to position Nero for succession. She convinced Claudius to put men in positions of power who favored her. She persuaded him, for example, to recall Seneca, the philosopher and writer, from exile and elevate him to public service, eventually putting him to work as a tutor for Nero. She also worked tirelessly to eliminate any competitors. In one noteworthy case, she accused Caligula's previous wife and future contender for Claudius's hand, Lolia Paulina, of treason for questioning astrologers regarding the emperor's marriage. Lolia Paulina's property was seized, she was exiled, and forced to commit suicide. Agrippina even had another woman exiled solely because Claudius complimented her appearance. However, Agrippina's crowning achievement was arranging for her son's adoption by the emperor. Claudius already had 2 children from his previous ill-fated marriage to Messalina, and his son Britannicus was intended to succeed him. As Agrippina successfully argued that the great Augustus had always had 2 candidates ready and waiting in the event of his death, Claudius adopted Nero in 50 AD. Nero quickly became the presumed heir to the empire since he was 3 years older than Britannicus and the son of the now very powerful Agrippina. To further cement Nero's claims to the empire, Agrippina arranged for Nero to marry Octavia, Claudius's daughter. Following Nero's adoption, Agrippina's powerful status was publicly affirmed with formal honors. Among other things, she has bestowed the title Augusta. A veteran colony named Colonia Claudia Augusta Agrippinensium was also built near Agrippina's birthplace. Claudius granted her the right to sit on a separate tribunal and welcome foreign and visiting guests alongside him, an innovation that was regarded culturally unacceptable for a woman, but emphasized her prominent position in the empire. Nero became emperor upon the death of Claudius. As Agrippina had linked her interests with Nero's, she now expected to partake in the empire's rule. Nero was initially little more than a figurehead, with Agrippina leading in his name. The first password issued to the Praetorian Guard, Optima Mater, the best of mothers, was symbolic of her early political importance. She was made a priestess of the newly formed religion, honoring the deified emperor Claudius, and she appeared on coins alongside Nero, sometimes as a goddess. Her power dwindled as Nero grew older. Nero fell in love with Acte, an imperial freedwoman from a much lower social class than himself. When Agrippina learned their relationship, she wielded enough authority to compel Nero to conceal it rather than end it. When Nero began to seek advice from Seneca rather than his mother, because of his mother's objections, she changed tactics and recognized her error, even offering the pair the use of her bedroom. However, in the year 58 AD, another issue arose in the form of Poppaea Sabina, Nero's new obsession. Poppaea was married, but she was also rich, beautiful, aristocratic, and determined, with every asset except goodness, as Tacitus describes her. Poppaea soon had Nero under her control. She claimed that Agrippina would not allow him to marry Poppaea for fear of exposing his mother's avarice, pride, and control over the Senate. Poppaea's influence was unopposed, in part because many people wanted Agrippina's authority to be diminished. Nero began to think about ways to murder his mother. He finally decided on a ship with a portion that might collapse and dump her into the sea. He invited her to dinner as if their disputes had been settled, and then sent her off to her villa across the Bay of Baiae. Agrippina was then thrown into the sea once the ship fell, as planned. However, ever the survivor, Agrippina swam till she was scooped up by a little boat. Agrippina told Nero about her escape, pretending she did not know what he was up to. Nero, distraught, summoned Burrus and Seneca for assistance. Both agreed that because the Praetorian Guard was sworn to defend the royal family, they would not consent to her death. Finally, Nero directed one of his freedmen, who harbored personal grievances against Agrippina, to assassinate her, citing the lie that she had sent a messenger to assassinate the emperor as grounds for her execution. The freedmen and 2 other officers broke into her bedroom. Seeing them, Agrippina cried, "If you have come to visit me, you can report that I am better, but if you're assassins, I know my son isn't to blame. He did not execute his mother." As they drew in on her, she bared her abdomen and cried out, "Strike here," for this bore Nero. Before succumbing to their blows, Agrippina was cremated that night and buried in an exposed and unenclosed grave, without honor.